This is Nebraska Farmcast, a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm Ryan Evans. When it comes to farm leases, having a verbal or handshake agreement in place rather than a written document can present challenges for all parties involved. Jessica Groskopf, an agricultural economist with the Center for Ag Profitability, has a new article up on our website at cap.unl.edu that she has written along with some co-authors that provides an overview of verbal leases and, in particular, the termination dates associated with them under Nebraska law. And she joins me now for more. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Ryan.
Well, thanks for contributing this article with super helpful information, and we'll get to it here. So how is the lease year set up for verbal farmland leases in Nebraska? If you can maybe walk through some important dates.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important that we're just talking about those verbal or those handshake lease agreements. And the state of Nebraska sets the start date for that lease as March 1st of the current year. So for example, for the 2022 crop year, the crop year actually started March 1st of 2022. So that's a really important designation. Now, that also means that it expires February 28th or 29th, depending on whether it's a leap year. So we have to think about that lease as a year-long commitment starting on March 1st. But the law also states that we have to notify a tenant of lease termination 6 months in advance. So that means that no later than September 1st, we have to notify someone of that termination. So even though it feels like it's a long ways away, if you are interested in terminating a verbal lease with your tenant, you need to do that during the month of August of this year. So we're going to terminate the 2023 lease by September 1st, no later than September 1st of 2022.
And what happens if the notice to quit is given or received, in fact, after September 1st?
It depends on whether or not you have an amicable relationship. So if you both agree that that relationship should dissolve and the tenant is willing to walk away from that property, usually you don't have a problem. However, if there is a chance that will go to court, you need to have proof. You need to have proof that you provided that notice of termination prior to September 1st of the year before. So again, if we're looking forward to the 2023 crop year, we need to notify our tenants of that termination or change in relationship prior to September 1st.
And is there anything to be aware of as far as how that notification needs to be made or how that verbal lease is terminated officially?
So we recommend that you do that through a certified letter that's written by your attorney, just to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. Of course, you can do that yourself. But again, we recommend that you use an attorney. Nebraska Extension does not provide an example termination agreement. And again, we reference you to your legal counsel to appropriately put that together, again, before September 1 of this year.
And a lot of what we've been talking about so far has to do with cropland leases, right? So how are pasture lease terminations different from a cropland lease?
So pasture leases are different in the fact that typically they're for a 5-month grazing season. And so they're typically terminated at the end of the grazing season. So there is no termination notice for a pasture lease agreement. So that's really important if you're thinking about pasture leases, especially summer pasture. There is no termination notice that's required.
Great. And I know you and your extension colleagues often advocate for getting a lease in writing whenever possible. So what are some of the risks that are associated with verbal leases and not getting that in writing?
I think the most obvious one is that we forget, right? Like we forget what we agreed to, or we misunderstand potentially what that handshake agreement really means. And so by having a lease agreement in writing, we've spelled out for both parties exactly what that lease states. And it's a really important part of an estate plan. So one of the things that folks forget is if something happens to you, either as a landlord or a tenant, your heirs will be responsible for carrying out the terms of that lease. Well, if they weren't there during the discussion of what the handshake is, you're putting your heirs at a disadvantage in terms of that relationship. Now, hopefully everybody, is above the water, right? And is honest with each other about what that agreement was. But there's no written document that states, whether it's a crop share or cash lease, what that agreement was. So having a written lease is the easiest way to make sure that everybody's on the same page, especially in the chance of an accident or death of one of the parties. The other thing I would say is, especially for my dry land producers, if you think about the crop year, the state statute does not align with dryland production crop years. So if you are a dryland farmer in Cheyenne County, the start date of March 1 doesn't make any sense. So the written lease allows you to adjust the dates to more accurately reflect when that crop season will be. So it allows you to create more flexibility, more understanding, and just really spell out all of those lease provisions that you expect one another to uphold.
And if somebody has been using verbal leases for a long time, is it cumbersome to update those and change them over into a written lease, or is it, I guess, best just to wait until the next year to do that, or what's your advice there?
So again, if you're going to terminate or change that verbal lease, it needs to be done with notification by September 1st, before September 1st. So when I think about that, if you are looking to move from a verbal or handshake lease to a written lease agreement, I think it's pertinent to terminate the handshake agreement and then replace it with a written agreement. And again, if you're working with a landlord or a tenant, having that open conversation is really important. You don't want to, miscommunicate with one another regarding your intentions. But there does need to be a break between when that verbal lease was terminated versus when the written lease begins. And again, if you guys are in a good relationship and you're both on the same page, you can work through that. But if the relationship is unstable, we want to make sure that we have, again, all of the information taken care of, or all of those steps taken care of, to ensure that if we need to terminate that relationship, that it's done in a timely manner. That way you can explore additional options for other tenants.
Great. And we do want to remind listeners to check out that article that you have written up on our website at cap.unl.edu. We're toward the end of that. You point folks toward aglease101.org, a great resource that we often recommend here in the Center for Ag Profitability. They have a document library with sample leases that are available for people to look at, and even you can just kind of fill in the blank on a lot of those, I believe. So aglease101.org, a great resource developed by extension specialists from in the North Central region. And again, check that out in Jessica's new article at cap.unl.edu. Jessica, thanks so much for the great information, and hopefully we'll help a lot of people today.
Yep, absolutely. And if you have any questions regarding the lease termination or what the going lease rates are, also keep your eye open for our upcoming landlord-tenant workshops that will be happening throughout the fall and winter across Nebraska.
All right. Thanks again, Jessica. Take care.
Thanks.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.